Okay, welcome. You've come to the right place if you're interested in dealing with your own complexity in your life. How many of you are leaders? How many of you would say you're leaders? Thank you. You're all wrong. Put your hands up. All of you are leaders. If you're in a classroom, you're leading a lot of people in their day-to-day work and in their decision making. If you are not in a classroom, you're leading an organization. Or at the very least, you're leading your own life. And one of the things that's been a theme of this conference and one of the things we've been dealing with recently is what it's like to lead in complexity. And so I'd like to make that a little easier for you. Wasn't that nice? All the complexity went away, right? That's all we need to do, right? We're just going to get rid of the complexity. We'll all be calm and we'll be able to handle the world that's coming at us. How many people think the complexity that's happening in society is going to decrease? We're going to have a less complex society. It's probably going to get more complex. It's probably going to be more demands on our time. Okay? And one thing I'd like to say is that if things get more complex, how are you going to cope with them? How are you going to manage them? What guides you on a day-to-day basis? Because you're not in charge of your attention. If you think you're in charge of your attention, and you looked over there just a second ago, I wonder what pulls you away from what you want to focus on and what you want to concentrate on. And so today we're going to talk about this complexity that we're facing. We're currently going through the fourth industrial revolution. We hear in the UAE, there's even a plan to deal with it. We know not just that another change is coming, but the pace of change is changing. The pace of change is getting faster. How quickly we have to adapt is also changing. So do we have to get faster and faster to deal with it? Most people start to think that way. We start to speed up. We start to try and manage more things. And for most people, that's become problematic. They fear that they're missing out in the world. They fear that what they're doing is going to take longer. When the fourth industrial revolution is happening, when every other industrial revolution happened, it wasn't just about there being more. A lot of people try and deal with the changes by looking for new technologies. Let me find a new curriculum for my class. Let me find a new way to teach. And all that leads you to do is to do more and more. But in the past, when these changes have come, what they've involved is what Ronald Lalonde of Harvard calls adaptive change. Not just more, but changing the way that we look at the problem is the way that we get through the problem. Professor Genevieve Bell says, every time there's been a shift, the way that people are in the world and the way that they interact changes. So how do we change with that? I happen to be very fortunate to work in positive education, positive psychology. So we get to think about what is it that people value and what is it that they care about. And it turns out that thinking about purpose isn't just something that is nice to do to remind you of, what you value in life. It turns out that if you actually live by your purpose, it increases your happiness, it increases your self-esteem. And so this is Michael Steger, who's done a lot of research on meaningfulness in life. And it turns out that people who have a greater sense of meaningfulness in life and are able to apply it on a day-to-day basis, it's a protective factor to deal with complexity. In fact, I like to think of it as a bit of a knife that cuts through the complexity because it allows you to deal by staying focused on what's most important to you. What I'd like you to leave with today in the next few minutes is a couple ideas, but more importantly, to do this, to stay focused on your purpose, is about practices. So I'm going to give you 2 practices. And the thing about practices is you have to go away and practice them. So I'm based here in Dubai, And if you start practicing them, I'm happy to hear about it and hear how it's working for you. But that's where I'm going to take you today, is 2 practices that can really help you stay focused on purpose. I've worked in schools where purpose is very clear. Schools write a mission statement. What do you believe in as a school? Schools write a set of core values. What do you care about? And then they put them on a website, they put them in a book, and they forget about them. I can tell you pretty much every school's core mission statement that they've written. It is develop young people's potential so they can make a contribution to the world and be their best selves. Just about every mission statement I've read boils down to that. So why is that so hard to do? To help people become their best selves and then use that to do great work in the world and in their life. It turns out that focusing on purpose in schools has a dramatic impact on what students are willing to do and how willing they are to learn. This research from David Yeager involved looking at having students do a task. Some of them were told to do the task, and if they didn't do it well, they'd lose something. So they kind of threatened them a bit and told them they'd get in trouble for it. Some of them were told that this skill, if you get it, it'll help you become better at something. And a third group were told that if you do this, it's good for our community. It's actually going to help the reputation of our school, our organization. The students of the 3 who stayed with the task the longest were the ones who believed it was going to help the organization. Not the ones who were doing it for their own good, not the ones who were going to do it to avoid getting in trouble. The ones who would do the task the longest were the ones who believed they were serving something bigger than themselves. And we have to think about that in an age when a lot of people think that the thing we should be striving for is, let's get happy. Let's get happiness first. It turns out from a lot of research that if happiness itself is the goal, it's a recipe for disaster. And there's a good reason for that. We adapt to our level of happiness. Call this the hedonic treadmill or hedonic adaptation. If you start getting used to something being a good way, it stops having that beneficial impact for you, and you just start wishing that that's the way things were every day. You start thinking maybe even that that's the way you deserve things to be every day. It turns out that people who have a strong sense of purpose, now I'm not going to say this is easy because it does involve some risk. The soccer goalie for the Mexico team during the World Cup went out of the net and joined the attack against Germany for the last 3 minutes of the game. Why would he do that? What was his purpose in doing that? Well, it depends how you think about what a goalie's job is on a soccer team. If he thinks his job is just to stop the ball from going in the net, he wouldn't do that. In order to do what he did, he said, no, my goal is to help the team win. My goal is a bigger purpose. And because of that, he could make a call that helped the team win. It turns out, again, from Barry Schwartz and Amy Rosiski's research, that people who have a strong sense of purpose often go above and beyond in their job. A lot of custodians or cleaners in hospitals who thought that their job was just a task list would just do the tasks. But they found a group of people who had fewer sick days, who stayed in the job longer, and sometimes who actually got in trouble because what they did was they didn't do their job when they were supposed to. But when they were asked why they didn't do their job when they were supposed to, it turned out, well, I didn't want to mop the floor then because there's a woman down the hallway and she just had hip surgery and she likes to use her walker at that time. So if I washed the floor then, the floor would be slippery. And so I didn't do it. It turns out when they interviewed people like that, they didn't think their job was to wash the floor. They thought their job was to keep people healthy in the hospital by keeping it clean. And people who have that higher sense of purpose are often willing to do more and go further. So beyond the hedonic treadmill, how do we figure out our purpose? This is character strength. We think about the 24 character strengths from positive education. Prudence is one that's got a bad rap because people think prudence is just be cautious. Just be careful that this isn't going to cause a threat to you when you make a decision. It turns out, though, when you read up about prudence, prudence requires courage because it's the value of making sure that what you most care about is in your mind when you're making decisions. What's most important to you is in your mind when you're making decisions. And it's also the idea of saying, in order to get there, I'll follow steps. It's kind of looked at as one of those values of self-control because it keeps you from, oh, well, I want to run the marathon. Oh, should I eat this bag of chips? Maybe no, I'm going to put it aside because I want to stick to my goal. So how does prudence help us? In schools, we know that there are a lot of things that want to pull us away from what we care about. Tell me if this has happened to you. And if this has kept you from what you wanted to do in your school environment. Everybody nods at that one, right? Prudence is the idea or the character strength of saying, what do I most want to do with my time right now? What's most important to me? Because there will always be too many demands on your time. There will always be too many things to focus on. So let me leave you with two suggestions. Dan Ariely has done a lot of work around what is it that people do and what is it that they do in their day-to-day life. And he says a lot of people follow their calendar, but the things that people put in their calendar are often the things that are easy to put in a calendar. So what they put in their calendar are meetings. And then they say, why are you so frustrated? Well, I went to meetings all day. Well, why? Because that was what was in my calendar. Those were the tasks. That's what I had to do. How many of you are willing, and again, I said prudence, I said this was easy, but I said it might take some courage. How many of you have in your calendar a space for reflection during your day? That you actually build it into your calendar? How many of you have a space for like being quiet or being still and kind of just taking time for yourself? How many people put that in your calendar? How many people put family time in their calendar and block it out? Meal time. What's another one that we could put in there? How many time I just saw Professor Solberg talking about play. How many people put time for play in your calendar? In your calendar? That's awesome. So I've been following this now for a few months, and I have to say I'm not great at it. Sometimes I don't get there, but I have been calendaring my exercise time, my meditation time. I've been calendaring my family meals, and I've been calendaring playtime with my children. It doesn't make it perfect, because sometimes you want to be able to just have time where you can adapt. But they have become my priorities because what my purpose is to live a well life so that I can do more in education. So because that's my purpose, I've started to build the practice. So I showed you at the start that your attention is not your own. If somebody made a big noise right now, you'd all turn and look at it. But sometimes you have your attention. Sometimes you have that rational moment where you can decide. That's when you're sitting down to do your calendar. That's where you could build in those things that are going to make a real difference in your day and in staying on purpose. I'm going to leave this one because I think I want a few time for questions. So, turns out here I am talking about a new technology to help you through the complexity. It's a pretty old one, really. We owe this one to, like a lot of things from positive psychology, ancient wisdom informed by science, informed by what we know today from research, informed by evidence, in our case, informed by evidence from what works in schools. And it turns out that prudence, also known as practical wisdom, is a value that's been around for a long time. In fact, that's old Aristotle talking about it as the number one value. And he says it's the number one value because you need it to help you activate your other values. It helps you stay on purpose. Staying on purpose doesn't happen by accident. It happens by planning. And I really suggest that if you want to build it into your life, just starting to calendar those other things that matter most to you will make a difference in how successfully you stay on purpose. So back to my initial starting point. 1, knowing your purpose and being clear on what it is that you're trying to serve, that's bigger than yourself, makes a real difference in your satisfaction and the meaning you get from your life. And adding in the steps to do it makes a huge difference as well. So, again, as I mentioned briefly, we are here in Dubai because we don't just help schools learn about this, we help schools with the practices of embedding positive practices in their lives and then teaching it to students. We start with teachers because the only way we're going to be able to deal with a real change that's happening is by starting to change the adults and have them develop the practices that are best for students. Thank you for your attention today. I think I may have a minute or two if there are any questions. Do I have a minute or two for questions? Any quick questions from the audience that I could answer right now that might help you clarify or actually do this practice in your own life? Questions? Oh, yes, thanks.
Sometimes you have a purpose in life and you work really hard for it, and you did everything you can to reach that goal, and for reasons that not yours, you don't get your purpose. Then you are confused. And how to get out of this confusion to the next step?
Oh, I'm already mic'd. So if everyone heard that idea of purpose is not the same as a goal. So you may get to something on your way, but purpose is more about what's a guiding thing that I want to serve. So purpose is not necessarily about getting there. It's about, am I living in service to the thing I most care about? So it doesn't matter if I get there or not. I know that what I used my energy for was something that meant something to me. So instead of chasing after more or the next thing, I stayed focused on those things that were most meaningful. And even if I don't get there, then generally people have a better sense of self when they do that. Yeah. Cool. Any other questions? Oh. Thank you. Thank you for your time.